Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Coram and Justin Nielsen here with a breakdown of the action for Monday, January 22nd, where we saw gains across the board. But Justin, underneath the surface, that rotation was pretty notable.
Yeah, we'll certainly talk a little bit about how the small caps were having their day in the sun today. And of course, part of that was the Treasury yields coming down a bit. But we also have some stocks to cover too. Of course, with Treasuries down, real estate kind of gets a boost. So we'll take a look at a REIT, not something we normally do with digital realty. Also, MongoDB, which is in the database area, and also ASML, which has earnings right around the corner, a semiconductor equipment maker.
It sure does. All right. Well, we'll get to those three stocks, but first, let's analyze the major indexes. The Nasdaq today up 0.3%. The S&P 500 up 0.2%. The Dow up almost 0.4%. But like you said, Justin, the story really today was the small caps, with the Russell 2000 leading the way, up 1.9% here after coming down to a level where you'd want it to hold and bounce, and that's what we're getting.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. I mean, it kind of had this 1900 level that we were looking at as an area of interest for support. And that was right around the 50-day moving average line. So, what about on the upside? Well, this 2000 level is something, if you go to the weekly chart real quick, this is something that we've been watching for a while. We did get above it briefly, couldn't hold it. So, the next question is for a lot of these areas that we're seeing in stocks and indexes like the Russell, when they get above this area, can't hold it, they might have to do it a couple times, a couple tries, in this case multiple, but this time, if it gets back above 2000, it'll be interesting to see if it can hold it this time. So that's one of the things we're going to be watching here. Of course, the Nasdaq composite, that gapped up at the open, was looking strong. It wasn't a bad close necessarily, but I mean, it was in the lower part of the range. So, this is kind of a reminder that you don't want to go chasing things on Monday, especially after such a strong day that we had on Friday. It can be real easy to say, gosh, I want more. And you're looking at the stocks over the weekend and you're like, I should be, more invested and I need to, buy this. If you do that kind of at the open, sometimes that can be a little disappointing. But, look, there's still stocks that are holding up. The tech area is alive and well. And, we've kind of gotten above that 15,000 level. So for the NASDAQ, it's a matter of, hey, can we hold this? And since we're talking about levels, we might as well pull on over to the S&P 500 because we've
Mhm.
got a level there too that we're keeping an eye on, since this kind of surpassed its old 4,800, 4,818 level from way back in 2021. Now it's a matter of, hey, can it hold this level and stay above it? So there's a lot of questions now in terms of, hey, you cross the obstacle, but can you stay there?
Exactly, yeah. And especially for small caps, I mean, this is breadth, right? We want more participation. So if we can really get the small caps in gear while other areas of the market continue to hold up and maybe digest, present new buying opportunities, we want everyone rowing in the same direction, right,
Right.
Justin?
Yeah, and to that end, let's take a look and just compare what the S&P 500. I think you said it was up 0.2%. What about the RSP equal weight S&P 500? That was up
Yeah,
0.53%.
outperformed.
Yeah, so QQEW, the equal weight Nasdaq 100, that was up 0.4%. So a little outperformance on the broader equal weighted indexes. So it was just a little bit less favorable for the big mega cap names that we've been eyeing, the Magnificent Seven and so on. But there was still a lot of power out there, and that's good to see a little bit more of that breadth. Because let's just real quickly go to GMIAA and GMIAB, which both of these show the advanced decline line of the NYSE and for the Nasdaq, and these have been stuck below that 10-day moving average line. So it had a really strong start after the November 1st follow through day, but the breadth has been something lacking here. So today is just one day, so let's not declare victory yet. But a few days like this cobbled together, and we could probably see that get back above the 10-day moving average line. One more thing that I'm kind of keeping my eye on, speaking of 10-day averages, is if you go to NASDQ, something that I
Mhm.
kind of noted on IBD Live this morning. The new highs versus new lows. I mean, it was well in favor of the new highs for a while there after the November follow through day. But that kind of turned, right? It came back down. And we've seen that a number of times. The crossover hasn't lasted. So here again, I think we just want to see this last a little bit more, have those
Yeah.
new highs continue to overwhelm the new lows.
Definitely. And you mentioned treasury yields coming in. So here's a look at 0 TNX, the 10-year yield after hitting resistance at a key level and now backing off.
Yeah, and so before we were talking about, okay, the 200-day moving average line was an area where it hit, kind of came back in, and the question was, will it get back above that? That 4% level was kind of an area of interest. It did clear it. It did hold it. It had one more kind of test, but now it's come back up to the 50-day moving average line. So the question is, okay, we hit some resistance here. Does it do another one of these tests like it did? After it, got resistance to the 200-day, and then does it power ahead of that 50-day moving average line? Because you'll definitely
Mm.
see a little bit of shift if we see the treasury yields, power higher.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have to keep an eye out on that direction. Let's look at a couple of sector ETFs underneath the surface. Chip stocks, SMH up a 0.5%, IGV representing software up 1% today, even though it closed off highs. Also, XLRE real estate up a 0.5% today, and XHB, the home builders, which of course love it when we get those declining yields, is up 1.8% today. So your thoughts on the sector action underneath the surface, Justin?
A lot of interesting stuff going on. I mean, tech is certainly still holding up as a big area of interest. You had Taiwan Semiconductor last week, give some preliminary guidance, looking really good on the revenue side. So, the semiconductors are still doing very well. You're having a lot of participation, not just from the fabless, the manufacturers, the equipment makers. We're going to talk about ASML a little bit later. You've got the software. We talked about on IBD Live today how many computer software enterprise stocks there are out there that are
Ton.
participating in this. And whether it's in the Growth 250 on our IBD Live watch list, it's just a lot of these are setting up and powering higher. You just see a lot of great relative strength there. So it's definitely, tech is an area that you just have to be watching. And these are two of the biggest areas I think that are of note right now.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's now take a look at DLR. It is a REIT, but it has tech exposure, Justin. So tell us more about this stock up 2.4% today.
Yeah, so a lot of people are just talking about how disastrous the commercial real estate market has been in terms of just how much stuff has shifted, how the math has changed with the higher rates and everything like that, and that there could be more destruction to come. But there are these areas that are still doing pretty good in real estate. We've been talking a lot about the residential. Should note that stocks like PHM that have earnings coming up in the residential home builder space, DHI that's on leaderboard. But another area, there's the medical space for real estate that's been looking interesting. We've seen a little bit more strength in medical apartment buildings. There's still a demand for housing, right? And another area is technology. So with all the talk about AI, you're going to need a lot of servers to house those. I mean, a lot of space to house those servers, and that's what digital realty does. So it just kind of reminds me of the whole, when the gold rush happens, you got those guys that are selling the picks and shovels at the general store down at the bottom of the hill. And digital realty seems like it might be one of those situations where it doesn't matter who the leader is, they're going to be using space and digital realty. That's what they do.
And an actionable bounce today for this stock.
Yeah, so this is just coming out of your classic, flat base. In fact, base on base, because a lot of times when you see a stock that will come out of a base and it doesn't make that 20% gain, but then it holds. A lot of times it'll find support right at the top of the previous base. That's what we're seeing here, and those base on base structures can be very powerful. Bill O'Neill, the founder of Investors Business Daily, used to talk about them as like a spring that's just waiting to spring, to spring up. So that's kind of what's this digital realty reminds me of. Now, granted, a lot of times the REITs are a little bit slower moving, so shouldn't expect the same kind of gains that you would from a semiconductor stock. But this is one way that you can maybe diversify your portfolio if you're getting a little bit too heavy in your high octane names.
Yeah. and 3.5% yield with this one too. So something to keep in mind. Not the only reason to stay in a stock. You want the stock to perform, but just something to keep in mind there. Okay, and let's go to MDB. This was today's stock of the day, MongoDB. Taking a look at the daily chart here, that 400 level is the area to watch here, and it got above it today.
Yeah, so I like this. I like the line that you drew there. Crossing a downtrend today. The close was a little bit, mediocre. There was some volume behind it, but we do have a while here for earnings on this one. But the fundamental story, I mean, look, you've got some really strong numbers here. If you go down below, there's 317 in the last, 504% growth in the quarter before that, and 180%, 375%. Just some really big growth numbers here, and that's something that we really look for, that combination of strong earnings growth and a chart that is looking good too. Looking at the weekly chart here, it's important to note that this isn't just breaking a downtrend lately. It's also this 400 level that has been an important level for years now. So the question is, hey, can we get above this level and stay above it? Because MongoDB hasn't it's been teasing a little bit. It gets above there, comes back into its base, gets above there, pulled back again. So let's see if it can hold it this time.
Yeah, that would be great. And last but not least, let's take a look at ASML. Chip sector definitely in focus. And within that, a lot of semi equipment stocks looking interesting, perking up, and with earnings due soon. So that'll be interesting to watch. But ASML on fire lately. Last week, up over 6% and trying to add to its gains this week.
Well, certainly one of the catalysts there, as we said, when Taiwan Semiconductor had their big move as they announced some preliminary guidance. They're a manufacturer. What do manufacturers need? They need equipment. So ASML really, kind of takes the cake in terms of some of the equipment that they have. That's very unique and very pricey. So a lot of people need that equipment in order to make their semiconductors, and that's where ASML comes in. Now, this is a reminder. Look, this is probably something that you could have bought as TSM was giving that guidance. Really strong move off of the 50-day moving average line. But one of the things you do have to be aware of, and this is for a lot of stocks, earnings are coming. Earnings
Mhm.
season is ramping up. It's probably going to start peaking over the next few weeks, where the majority of stocks are going to be announcing. But this one does have earnings coming up January 24th before the market open. So just be aware of that. That means that tomorrow, is your decision day. Once the market closes, you're either in or you're out. And what can make that decision a little bit easier? Sometimes looking at the option market, kind of getting an idea of what the expected move is versus how much cushion you have. And
Mhm.
again, it depends on your style, right? How much cushion do you have? How long have you been holding this? Is it a recent buy? Do you want to just wait and see what happens with earnings and then, get into it? There's a lot of different ways to handle it. But certainly ASML, if you go to the weekly chart real quick, this is one that has been, a little out of favor. It hasn't been participating as much, certainly at not the way it was in 2020, when it was just this nice steady move that it had above its 50-day 10-week moving average line. But this is, again, really set up nicely to benefit if more and more chips are going to be made. So I wouldn't count it out, and definitely be interested to see what happens on that earnings report.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Justin. And thanks everyone for tuning in. That is it for today, but we will be back in the morning on IBD Live. So please join us, investors.com/IBD Live for all the details on that. We'll see you there. And we'll also see you right back here tomorrow at the close.